I know it looks like this is we already have more people in this chat than any other night. So we're we're starting off on a good foot. So thank you for joining us. My name is Suzette Remsen. I actually think I'm looking at these names and I know almost everyone here. This is our final night of leadership conversations, elevating the voices of the Bronx. And we're having leaders here that are not just positional leaders, but leaders who are impactful, powerful, inspirational folks. And we are looking forward so much to the conversation today. Before we officially start, I'd like to acknowledge Dr. Janet DeSimone, who is our partner in crime, and actually is the reason we had this leadership series. She was the one who we started this with, I think, 2 years ago. Dr. DeSimone is a force behind leadership studies at Lehman. She recently started the new doctorate at Lehman and the MSEL degree, which I can see a few MSEL folks on here. And then our Office of Campus Life staff, David Chakape, Assistant Director of Clubs and Organizations, Nathaniel Gaskew, Assistant Director of Budgets, Patricia, who I see is in the food bank coordinator, Mary, who promotes every single program that we do at Campus Life, and Miss Emily Weiland. Emily is the SGA representative and leadership instructor. And Emily will now introduce the very inspirational Elias Alcantara.
Hello, everyone. Elias has a very large bio, so bear with me. Elias Alcantara currently serves as Senior Vice President for Corporate Affairs at Macquarie Group. In this role, Elias focuses on implementing a government affairs strategy that builds on the group's existing presence in the America's marketplace, while also exploring new investment opportunities. Prior to joining Macquarie, he was the founder and CEO of the Bronx Element Strategies, BEST, a social impact and justice strategy consulting firm. Through BEST, he advised a portfolio of private, philanthropic, and public sector stakeholders and organizations across the country to sustain social justice reform. Clients included the National Basketball Association, Columbia University, and Bloomberg Philanthropies. Previously, Elias served in the Obama White House as Senior Associate Director in the White House Office of Intergovernmental Affairs. During his 5-year tenure, Alcantara was President Obama's liaison to local elected officials, serving as a primary interface to mayors, county, and local officials across the country. During this time, he established and managed strategic partnerships with local and national leaders on key policies, including immigration reform, workforce development, and criminal justice reform, with the focus on policing and re-entry. Elias is active in local and national efforts aimed at promoting and expanding social justice, equity, and economic mobility in underserved communities. He serves as a member of the Lehman College Foundation Board, trustee for the Sing Sing Prison Museum Board, and member of the Sankofa Org Board of Advisors, and member of the Hostess Community College Community Advisory Council. Elias is a graduate of Lehman College of the City University of New York and completed coursework for a Master's of Art in International Affairs at the Universidad de Chile. He is originally from Bronx, New York, where he currently resides. A few other key points. I have had the honor and privilege of working with Elias over the years, and he is just absolutely amazing. Just his heart is really focused on serving the Bronx, serving the people of the Bronx. And just this bio alone, like, it was large, but it doesn't even describe the person that Elias is. A few other key things that he did: he brought WCK to Lehman College. He helped us start our food justice leadership program. Just an amazing person. So incredibly honored that he's here today. And yeah, please give it up for Elias.
Emily, thank you for that very, very kind introduction. And I should know it's been an incredible pleasure working with you and getting to know you, Emily. I think we probably share the same love and heart for the Bronx and the Lehman community. And it really has been a joy getting to know you and obviously the broader team as we focus on issues around food security and sustainability. And of course, thanks to Suzette and David and the broader campus life team, who I feel like I'm an extended member of, for always inviting me to this opportunity to really kind of engage you all. First and foremost, sorry for running a few minutes late. I'll describe in a few moments part of the reason why I was late. And you know, it's the things that happen day to day that you don't expect sometimes, as you all are familiar with, which I think is one of the biggest lessons we get from growing up in the best borough in New York City and in the country, for that matter, the Bronx. I think is the resiliency to try to manage and handle whatever comes your way, even when you wake up and don't expect it to come your way. But I also want to, at the top here, give a shout out to one of my fellow Lehman alum colleagues and friends who I recently reconnected with, her, Mary Sanchez Alarcon, and her husband, Augusto Alarcon, who, if I remember correctly, they met at Lehman and are now very happily married. And they had a chance we reconnected over a few messages over the last couple of weeks. And I know hopefully we'll be seeing each other in person soon, but it's very kind of them to spend part of their evening tonight hearing a little bit about my story and hopefully hearing from you all, because I do want to spend the bulk of the time hearing from you all. So shout out to fellow alums that I went to school with while I was at Lehman. Which takes me back, because I think it's interesting. I didn't realize you all were going to start with that FBC interview. I still get pretty embarrassed, I guess, for lack of a better term, even though my friends tell me that I shouldn't be embarrassed. I should be incredibly proud that I had a chance to do an interview at such a historic moment, working for the first Black president of the United States, and not only having the chance to work there, but represent my community, represent my family. I'm a first generation Dominican American from the Bronx. And my family, like maybe similar to many of your families on this phone, in the great melting pot that New York City is and the Bronx is, came to this country in the early 80s for a better future. And in many ways, I got to maybe show my parents firsthand, God, I guess in my early 20s, when I was a bit of a baby, what really that sacrifice and how they were able to, in one generation, I think, accomplish something, right? It wasn't only my accomplishment, it was our accomplishment as a family. It was our accomplishment as a community, serving the president of the United States, but also serving the American people. And I'll just say, I'll just say this, as I've mentioned, right, already, my journey is not dissimilar to you all on this phone. In many cases, I just maybe took a different route, or maybe a few steps ahead or a few steps behind you. I'm a big fan of building network and community, building authentic network and community. Case in point, to kind of keep it in the storyline of my time at the White House, the person that hired me at the White House as an intern, I started as an intern, as I think you heard me mention in the interview, and the person that hired me and subsequently advocated for me to stay and work on at the time, and I think it still is around this number, there's only about 435 to 475 people that directly work for the president of the United States, that support the White House and moving the federal government, kind of being the top of the sphere in many ways of the federal government. But the person that hired me as an intern, which Suzette, I think Suzette is smiling, and probably David, because I know they've had a chance to meet her a number of times. The same person that advocated for me to get the job, the same person to this day that's like a sister to me, just 2 days ago got the opportunity to serve as the campaign manager for President Biden and Vice President Harris's reelection campaign. And her name is Julie Chavez Rodriguez. And I mentioned Julie in this vein about, developing network, authentic network and community, because her and I first met in 2012. In January, we met over the phone. This was when, right, Zooms weren't widely used. So I had a phone interview with her in October of 2011, which subsequently led to me interning for her, as she was the liaison to the Latino community and worked on immigration issues. And I spent not only 3 months with her, we spent a lot of time together, as you may imagine. It was a very busy portfolio and a very busy time for us. It was actually, I joined as an intern at the White House when 2 weeks before, I had the privilege in many ways of having the insight and knowledge that the president would be rolling out arguably one of the most consequential immigration policies that any president had ever rolled out, which was DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. And my job as Julie's intern was to help support her and the team on rolling out this policy, which, as many of you may be familiar with, was incredibly important, continues to be important in many of our communities. 3 months into me interning with her, she turns to me one late night. It had to be like 9:30 or 10 p.m. We were working obviously late hours as was the regular there. And she said, "Hey, Elias, do you have an updated resume?" And I said, "Yeah, I think so." And in my mind, I didn't have an updated resume because I didn't have time to update my resume. That's how much I was working. But I knew that I would update it within moments and get it to her. She said, "Send it to me because I want to recommend you for a job if you're interested." And I said, "Oh, what's the job?" She said, "Oh, it's a job here at the White House, staying at the White House." And I joked with Julie months later, after I got the job and things were in a good place. I said, "Julie, for 3 months, you were the most amazing boss, and I really admired you as a leader, but I didn't think you liked me because you were always so stern with me, and you were, in some cases, what some may misconstrue as being maybe slightly mean, tough love. And the moment I realized you actually liked me and wanted me around was when you recommended me for a job at the White House, let alone a job at the White House." And in retrospect, what I realized as I see her own journey in this life, she's, I should note, the first Latina to serve as senior advisor to a sitting US president, which is the highest rank that you could have within the White House. And I look back on that moment and what she was doing with me as an intern and what she subsequently has done with me as now, in many ways, she doesn't like me to call her a mentor because her and I are, she only has a few years on me, but really like a sister figure that she is to me, is training me for my next step and training me for that next opportunity, even when I didn't realize it as an intern, training me to go from intern to being a staff member, to being an aide to the President of the United States. So I mentioned that as much to celebrate Julie, because I've been celebrating her one-on-one as we've been in touch over the last few days. This is the first moment I get to kind of share that in a broader group and really just hone in on the notion of not networking for the sake of networking, not building relationships for the sake of building relationships, but being authentic in it and doing it in a way that I think you just never know. I mean, she is arguably in Democratic politics, and frankly, Republican or Democratic politics or independent politics, one of the most important Latina, one of the most important figures in politics who happens to be Latina, happens to be a woman. So I'm very proud of her and very proud to have been a part of that journey and frankly had a chance to work with her and under her. So I guess fast forward, and I'm jumping around a bit here, and what I want to do is I probably want to share maybe 2 or 3 more stories, and I just want to open it up. I mean, you heard the bio, and I think you saw that interview of young Elias. I think about another pivotal moment, I guess, in my life, and I'll tie it back to Lehman College. And Suzette may remember some of this, but I say that the lessons that I learned at Lehman, not only as a student and at arguably one of the best higher education institutions in this country, that I learned in the classroom were as important, and actually what I think was probably maybe slightly more important, if you ask me, of what I learned as a student leader on the Lehman campus. And I'll explain why. So I started I was a student government member. At the time, it used to be called CASA. And I started as a recruit I actually didn't get voted in the first time I started. So I got appointed, which was, as you think about, as I look back on that, and you think about how hard it is to confirm people, individuals to serve in the federal government, in the US Senate. If you ever have the opportunity to serve in government and you have the option to be appointed or get voted in, I think definitely pick the appointment, because that'll be a much easier track. So I had the chance to get appointed as student services programmer for a semester. And then following that year, I got the opportunity to study abroad. So interestingly enough, there was a debate, and this was with the former director of student life, Michael Sullivan, who became a dear friend and colleague. There was a debate about whether or not a student can study abroad and still serve in student government. And you could imagine what side of the argument I sat on. I obviously wanted to serve, and I was still a student, and I was still representing my community. I just was going to live in Europe at the time. But the student campus life office said, no, you have to resign. After weeks and I think months of negotiation, in the end, I think we were able to find some sort of loophole, and I was able to maintain my seat and still be an active member of student government from my time in London, because I was still going to be a registered student. So I mentioned that because that involved what now drives a lot of my life these days, is the art of diplomacy, and being able to disagree with someone or a group of people, but still getting to an outcome that I think ultimately allows either for compromise or I think for a mutually beneficial event. And I'll tell you why in a moment, why this ended up being beneficial for campus life and Michael Sullivan, who again is a dear friend. So fast forward, I come back from my study abroad, one of the most life-changing experiences of my life. And I start having conversations with my team about what the future of our student government looks like. In the end, we decide in a collective manner that I should run for student government president, and that we would build a team that also included, I should know, my other dear friend and another core part of my network, Ravi Ramprasad, who served as the vice president of the team, and subsequently became student body president. And it just so happened to be my senior year in college. So I got to basically put a capstone on my experience in college, with not only being able to graduate that year, but also being able to lead, in my opinion, one of the more active student government bodies. I mentioned the first story because if I were to have resigned, and frankly, probably would have been frustrated with that decision and not convinced or made the case, I'm not sure I would have had the opportunity to serve in that role at Lehman College. And that role is what taught me, from things like managing a budget, which we had, to again building consensus among a team, my immediate team, the team that was in student government, to disagreeing with parts of the Lehman College campus, including the president of the college, on issues and pushing the issues that matter for the students. Those are the same exact lessons that I took when I had a chance to live and study in Chile, as you heard Emily mentioned in my bio, when I had a chance to work arguably at the mountaintop of politics in America, the White House. And now day to day, when I work at one of the largest financial services and banks in the world, as well. So all that to say is, I know you're sitting here at 6:30 p.m. on a Wednesday evening. I know you're taking these type of experiences seriously, but I would not discount them as just a check the box exercise. I would not discount them as all right, I'm doing this now and then. I really do believe that the lessons that you learn in these leadership experiences and opportunities, as well as in the classroom, are really going to drive what you end up doing over the course of your career and your life. And then I guess I'll end with one last story, and it connects to maybe why I was a few minutes late today and kind of some of the things that come my way. I'm always asked, like, what do you actually do, and I started serving the closest people around me. to get an answer from them. The first person I asked was my mom. I'm like, Mom, when your friends ask you, what do? What do you tell them? And she said, I just tell them that you're always on the phone and you're always sending emails and you're always traveling. And that, beyond that, I'm not too sure, but those are the three things that I know are constants in your life. And I should note that I'm sitting in Denver, Colorado at the moment, for the largest convening of city officials representing every country in the Americas. It's a follow-up from the America Summit, which is hosted every couple of years, which brings together all the presidents of the countries in this region. And this is the city's version of that summit. So that's why I'm here today. So I'm like, okay, Mom, that's what I do. Okay, got it. Thank you. So then I decided to ask one of my best friends. And I said, hey, what do you tell people about what I do when they ask you? And he said, I lead with, my friend worked for the president of the United States. And I'm like, but that doesn't answer the question. Well, I always want to lead with that because I want people to know the context. And two, I say that you're a fixer. And that in the time that I've known you, and this is a friend that I've known over the course of my lifetime, I've never seen a problem presented to you that you haven't been able to either solve or find or create a plan that allows you to solve. And I'm like, okay, wow, that's interesting. That's a very, very interesting perspective. I'm like, wow, that's a very tall order. And then I decided to ask one of my former colleagues, who I would think, is kind of generally in my world, would have had a more specific example. And his response was, you're a person that develops relationships very well and maintains them and has the ability to leverage them when you need to make something happen. So I guess putting all those things together, it's interesting. My title, as Emily said, is Senior Vice President for Corporate Affairs. No one said that, right? No one said the company that I work for, right? Not even my mom. I mean, I felt like at least Mom would have said it. And everyone went back to ultimate either experiences or things that I've done or attributes that they connect with me as a person. Which means that whether or not I'm working at Macquarie, whether or not and I'm working at the White House or anywhere else for that matter, those are the things that ultimately people remember and people actually take away with them. So I want to hone in on that point because I think, honestly, for me, it was a learning moment of one, I realized people don't even understand what the heck I do. So I need to do a better job messaging what I do. But two, people aren't going to remember you for the title that you have and for the role that you have, right? And that's why, the whole notion of, I think running for office is one of the most admirable things someone could do. But similar to what actually President Obama has spoken about a lot since he left office is the most important title that we have as individuals in our communities is being a resident or citizen of that community. And that is the most powerful title that we have. We don't need a title to, quote unquote, maybe fix things or, quote unquote, drive a solution that's going to support our community. The most important title is just us. And that's what people are always going to connect. And that was a moment for me of realization of that. And I'll end with part of the reason why I was late today, just to give you a sense of my day-to-day. So I started my morning at Newark Airport at 6 a.m. To take a flight here to Denver. As soon as I was landing, there was a Zoom work meeting started. So I was immediately on my Zoom. And then that subsequently led to a few other Zooms. And then I ended up in a luncheon. And as I was going to the luncheon, it was the opening luncheon for the conference here, where I sat at the table facing the mayor of the city of Denver, surrounded by one of the biggest developer firms in the city of Denver. I look at my email and I got a notification that the president of Colombia had asked every single cabinet member to resign because of political strife and issues that were going on. And why is that important for me? One, I oversee part of what Emily described of what I do. I oversee the Americas in the work that I do. I represent my company in anything having to do with government and policy in the Americas. I just happened to be in Colombia 3 weeks ago, where I met with a number of senior officials in Colombia, and everything was perfectly fine. And I got that news that morning. So the to-do list that I had to get through and everything else completely sideways. The conference, I had to step out and make a bunch of calls to kind of figure out what is going on in Colombia, because we have some major investments there and we have a lot of interest in that country. And that just totally side railed my day. But I'll end with this. I think the ability for me to manage that and a lot of other things that I've had the chance and the fortune to manage over the course of my career so far was born in the Bronx at the end of the day. The resilience, the ability to switch gears, the ability to decide on a moment's notice whether I'm going to take the B train because it may be delayed, or the 4 train if I walk down 3 blocks to Jerome. Those are all things that I think inform my ability to make quick decisions on a moment's notice and hopefully make me better for it, not only as a person, but also in any organization that I'm in. So I'll end with that. I mean, the lessons we're learning, not only within the walls and the beautiful campus space of Lehman or in our community, which is our beloved Bronx, are the things that I think are going to always drive what we do day to day, whether you know it or not. And I feel like I'm an example of that. So with that, I hope any part of that or most of that or all of that was useful and helped with some takeaways, but would love to kind of make it, again, for the time remaining, make it more interactive and hear from you all, answer any questions or get any thoughts or comments from the group. With that, Emily, I'll turn it back to you, and Suzette, I'll turn it back to you all.
So, Elias, first of all, in all the time I have known you, people may not be able to define what your exact profession was, and you were evolving, but you were always very crystal clear on what you valued and what you cared about. Because I remember while you were still a student, always serving the Bronx, an intern. So this wasn't said in Elias's bio, but when he was an intern, the minute he got into the White House, he said, we have to get Lehman students in here. And we must have brought up like 8 groups of students to Lehman. He put a speaker series together, introduced us to all of his contacts, was very generous with that. So much that because of one of his contacts, we brought a group of students to meet the Supreme Justice Sonia Sotomayor. Even we had lunch with the first Puerto Rican ambassador, Marie Carmen Aponte, really very kind and generous. So when we were doing this series of elevating the voices of Bronx leaders, it felt impossible that we could do this without putting you as one of the speakers. So thank you for doing this on this really busy schedule. I knew it was impossible, Elias, that you could ever take 15 minutes to talk about your incredible leadership journey. Lots of questions in the chat.
I know I'm seeing them now. Yeah, I'm seeing them pop up.
We can read them for you. And then folks, just add your questions in here. A lot of love for you in the chat. Some of the folks had to jump off to a class, but they said that they wanted the recording of this. So from Ernesto, who served who was a military person, he's a vet. And Ernesto is asking, what is your favorite leadership book or books? And Ernesto is coming to the White House next week, actually. I am acting like you're in the White House, which probably should happen somewhere along the line. But he wants to know what's your favorite book.
By the way, I'm so glad we were able to get that tour. And I know, Suzette, we should talk offline about what other engagements we could do in DC, but I'm so glad we were at least able to get you in the building. COVID has thrown a wrench into how things navigate, but I know the president and First Lady Biden were eager to open up the doors, and the fact that we're going to have one of the first groups, as the White House has opened up for tours, be a Bronx group and a Lehman group, just makes me so excited. So Suzette, you may have to help me with the name of this book, but and I wish if I was at home, I would have pulled it out of my library, because I have a bunch of notes in there, post-its. Susan,
Exploring Leadership by Susan.
Exploring Leadership. Yeah. And Dr. DeSimone, by the way, I should have acknowledged you at the top. Thank you for your ongoing leadership and support. of not only the campus life team, Suzette, David, and others, but also of obviously the great student population and community. Would love to connect with you too if I could ever be helpful to you. But you know, and this may sound like a corny, cheesy plug, because you all are probably using that book for your leadership training and events. But I promise you, that book, I mean, boy, that book sat at my desk at the White House. And I had a chance, I was introduced to that book in I'm dating myself. You got to see young Elias, now you see older Elias. I guess I took my leadership course in 2003. I'm sorry, not 2003. That would make me much, much older. 2005. When I transferred, 2005, 2006, when I transferred over to Lehman from Medgar Evers College, which is where I started my college career. And that was the book that was assigned for the leadership course. And since that time period, I mean, and you know, you're reminding me, I probably need to go back to it, because I'm actually you know, dealing with some interesting leadership dynamics at the moment. So my solution and answer may be there, but exploring leadership, Susan Komen, I know Michael Sullivan had a chance to be with her a couple of years back, and apparently told her that I still use her book. And at the time I was still at the White House, and that I had that book on my desk. But that's the one that comes to mind. And the last thing I'll say is I'm also a big believer of just autobiographies. And you know, President Obama has written quite a few. As a kid-ish teenager, I had a chance to read Profiles in Courage by John F. Kennedy, which wasn't an autobiography, but was he wrote the book based on profiles of courage of historical individuals that he has seen, dating back from John Adams to more contemporary individuals. I think Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is also featured there. So that's another one that comes to mind, because I think, again, I'm a big believer of innovation, but I feel like we could find a lot of answers in things that have happened in history. We could find the answers. We could also find the things of what not to do. So I think it's always important to reflect. But those will be the kind of few that come to mind. But Susan Komen would probably be the one that I focus on. And I promise you, it's not a commercial. We did not coordinate that before the event.
No. And Mr. Sullivan was so generous with, like, he introduced me to Hubert, also generous with sharing his resources. I put the link for the book in the chat, folks, and we also have some in our office if you ever want to stop by. All right. Do you have any advice, Elias? From Elliot Baker wants to know, do you have any advice or steps for someone with no political experience yet would like to run for public office in 10 years? What about a 10-year plan, Elliot?
Thank you, Elliot, for that question. And I see you. Good to see you. And Ernesto, thank you for your service. I think Suzette said you served, you were military as well.
Ernesto, yes.
Yeah, Ernesto was. Yeah, Ernesto, thank you for your service, my brother. I appreciate that. And Elliot, you know, you and I should talk, because I've never done a 10-year plan. So you got to give me the secret sauce of how you're thinking about that down the line. I think, like I said earlier, no title is necessary, right? But that said, getting involved is necessary. So I would think about ways to, whether it's initiatives that are going on at Lehman that are impacting the broader Bronx community, like shameless plug, the Food Security and Sustainability Initiative, which I know is thriving but needs support, and that not only supports the campus, but I know supports the broader Bronx community. Think about things like serving on the community board. You know, these groups that are very localized, people don't realize how much power they have, and it frankly, it's at the nitty gritty, what some may consider not sexy kind of world of politics, but those are the folks kind of really making some important decisions and representing the closest to the community as well. The other thing is to, you know, start thinking about, depending on your party affiliation, you know, join the political clubs and parties in the county, in the city. And you got to start becoming visible, even if it is a 10-year plan. There's a great article in the Times, which I'll find. It's probably 3 years old at this point, 2 to 3 years old, but it details the moment. I think it was at about the 10-year mark when Eric Adams decided that he wanted to be mayor, and the people that he convened for dinner at a restaurant, one of his favorite restaurants in Brooklyn. And the article talks about that dinner and what was discussed. And then it goes into, and this was right after he had won, and it talks about his journey So I don't think it's ever too early to start thinking about these things. And when you look at our current mayor, I think it was just at about that 10-year mark they had that dinner that put him on the path to become mayor of New York City. And I'll find the article and get it to Suzette so she can send it around.
Ernesto wants to know, Elias, who are young up and coming political leaders we should be following and supporting throughout New York City and the nation?
Wow, that's a great question. I mean, listen, we broke a lot of records in one of our most recent city elections, right? I think for the first time, the city council has the most number of women serving in office at one time, and also in leadership, given obviously our speaker. We've had a woman speaker before, obviously, but collectively, I think represents the largest number of women. We also have the largest number of women of color as well. We have a bunch of amazing ones in the state. I'll start with the city, Pierina Sanchez, and talking about authentic networks and building relationships. I've known Pierina. Pierina and I go way back 10 plus years. I am so proud of her. I don't think her district covers Lehman, but it probably borders Lehman in the Bronx as in the city council. And she, from the moment I met her 10 plus years ago, I think I met her 13 years ago, to today, I have always been impressed by her, and her commitment and love for her community. And I was so happy when she obviously ran for office. That's someone to watch. She is incredible. And then I'm going to leave New York for just a quick moment and kind of take us across the country, because as you know, I work on national issues, and someone to look out for who just got elected mayor of Long Beach, California. I know LA always gets the love, but we got to remember, folks like Snoop Dogg are from Long Beach. Long Beach, an important city in California, and also a city that represents 500,000 people, about 500,000 people. They just elected their first African-American mayor. His name is Rex Richardson, and he is a former city council member. And I've known him since the city council member days. And he's sharp. He has a bright future, I think. And it's going to be interesting to see how he elevates Long Beach, because the previous mayor, Robert Garcia, who was, I think at the time, the first mayor to be elected that had been, he was a beneficiary of the equivalent to DACA under Obama that President Reagan had launched, effort to kind of help create a path for residency and citizenship. He's Peruvian American, openly gay, and he was the previous mayor of Long Beach, Robert Garcia, and he's also one to watch because he became Congress member and then opened up the mayoral seat. Rex Richardson stepped in, and both young guys. I mean, Rex, I think, is in his late 30s, and Robert, I think, is in his early 40s. So anyway, just to give love to the West Coast too, I'd say look out for Pierina Sanchez in the Bronx. She's amazing, and for New York City. And I'd say Rex Richardson, mayor of Long Beach, California.
Veronica wants to know, who are your mentors? And she says, thank you for sharing your journey.
Thank you, Veronica. And quickly, because I saw Ernesto say Marine Corps, hoorah, my best friend served for many years. So I lived that experience through him. And again, I thank you again for your service. And I have the honor of sharing a birth date with the Marine Corps. It was born on November 10th. Obviously a long time ago, but we share the birthday. So I have yet to get invited to the Marine Corps ball, which I hear is the ticket to go to every year, but maybe one day I'll get it. But thank you again, Ernesto, for your service, and thank you for sharing what branch you served in. So Veronica, to your question, mentors. So I'll speak because again, we're at Lehman, right? Virtually. Probably one of the most critical, important mentors, was like a father to me, is a gentleman by the name of Ira Bloom, who is a professor within the political science department at Lehman. He served as vice chancellor a while ago in CUNY for legal affairs. He's a proud product of CUNY. He went to City College undergrad. He's from the Bronx originally. Went to City College, then went on to go to Harvard Law School, and had to be back in his community. And I had the chance to meet him as a student at Lehman, and the rest is history. We met back in 2005. And he is, at every turn and point in my life. I mean, I could go on and on about stories, about ways that he's supported me. And these days, I like to say he provides probably some of the most important counsel to me as I kind of reach this, next phase of my adulthood, whether it's, from everything from, what I need to figure out at Macquarie to what I need to figure out in my personal life too, he has been a steadfast mentor, advisor, frankly, counselor to me in many ways. And I could never repay him for the amount of support that he's given me. And I like to believe I've repaid it quite a bit in terms of a few of the accomplishments, but Ira Bloom, professor at Lehman, who knew, right? This kid from the Bronx with Ira ends up at the White House and doing all these great, amazing things. But I attribute a good amount of the success to him. And then the other set of mentors are by the name of Gisela and Teofilo. And those are my parents. They are the original mentors in my life. And, call it a bit of a maybe I'm finding a workaround to the question, but and the answer, but we place our parents, right, in the category of parents, or frankly, the people that raise us, because that could be a grandparent, that could be an uncle, that could be an aunt, could be a neighbor. But my parents, I think a lot of the lessons that I still, sometimes it slightly annoys me because I'm like, why are there voices in my head in this moment? But are the lessons that my parents provided me growing up, and in many ways they served the job not only of parents but also as mentors for me.
Thank you, Elias. I love Ira also. He's such a gem on campus, but he always talks about you. What are some tips to success in life?
Tips of success: keep doing what you're doing. I mean, to be honest, I think I did evening sessions like this, but clearly you're already doing something right if you're joining us here to have this dialogue and hopefully take away. I really hope that I'm giving you some things to take away with you all that will help you on your journey. But keep doing what you're doing. That's all I'm going to say. I mean, you're on the right track. You're clearly on the right track, and keep pushing. And I'll only add this: bring a friend along, or bring a family member along.
Oh, thank you. Ernesto, I saw your second question, and I promised you I'd planned to hit up Elias, but I took it as like I'm asking him for one commitment at a time. So we'll ask him about like the tour right after this. Poor Elias is probably overwhelmed with all of our favors.
No, this is good. This is good overwhelming. Good energy.
Ibrahim wants to know, I'm sure you must have come across some difficulties and challenges. What motivated you, and how did you get past those moments? What would you say your leadership? Okay, so let's go with that first.
Yeah, that's a great question. I should know. I see Marianne mentioned Vanessa Gibson. Fantastic. You could not have a better Bronx Borough president. I've had a chance to get to know her a little bit since she was serving in obviously other elected roles. And she's someone that if I call her right now or at 11 p.m. with an issue, she will answer, she will be there, and you cannot ask for a better borough president. So agree with you, Marianne, on someone to watch as well. Difficulties. I mean, listen, I'm a half glass full kind of guy, I guess. That's probably what gets me through most of the difficult moments. And I should know, difficult moments and situations aren't going to stop coming, personally or professionally. But I do go back to what I said earlier. We're being trained for this. We've been trained for this. That is the biggest gift we've gotten from our community in the Bronx. But I'm a half glass full kind of guy. I'm an eternal optimist. And some friends will say that to a fault, because when I meet people, even if it's for the first time, I've known them for 10 years. When I meet them, they have all of me, because I really do believe in the power of people and the good in people. And even when I'm standing across or I'm sitting across folks that clearly, aren't, maybe may not be the nicest people or may not necessarily have my interests in mind and have only one interest in mind and that doesn't align, I still give them that benefit of doubt, and I still try to again go back to the core of us as human beings, right? And what hopefully what we could get to, even in disagreement, we get to that compromise. Like I mentioned the story earlier, when I was a student in student government. So the challenges keep coming, but I kind of try to hold on to those pillars, right? Of I'm a half glass full kind of guy. I'll be optimistic. So even if in this moment things aren't working out the way I want them to work out, they will work out in the end. And then just the resiliency that I think that we've built over time to face challenges that are undoubtedly going to come. I mean, come on, climate change. And we think about a bigger challenge than that as a community, as a society, as a world. We're going to have to manage that, and I think we're managing it, right? So it's not stop. It'll keep coming, but I think I hold on to some of those kind of foundational pillars, and that so far is getting me through.
Mhm. Thank you. Elias, I feel a little bad that I know your story sometimes maybe better than most people, and I kind of always want to jump in because your life has so many lessons. But Elias originally wanted to go to law school, and that didn't work out the way he, I think, planned. And he went on a journey to study abroad and kind of made the news because he saw himself as he just was solving a problem, I guess, was in this whole different country and was featured. And I feel like that's an important part of your story because a lot of times we see problems, but we don't do anything. And you did something. And that was pretty much a defining moment that I think got the attention of the White House. How hard is it again to become an intern in the White House? What's the Harvard comparison?
I think I don't know, but maybe one of my friends trying to boost himself up because he was an intern, but something like you get into Harvard 3 times before you get a White House internship, statistically speaking, purely by the numbers. But this was back in 2012. I don't know, maybe the odds have gotten better, but I still do think it's a difficult ticket based on the number of folks that apply versus the number of folks that get in. And Suzette is being very kind. I got rejected from law school. And I should have, how I didn't focus one of my stories on the countless rejections that I've gotten in my life to this day. And how in each and every one of them, more than likely always included tears and anger, and reflection, and support from my community, from my mentors and my family and the people around me. But for every door, for every 10 doors I got shut, I had one slightly cracked open, and I had a chance to walk through it, and I've done okay in life. And I'm very happy with the journey. But the rejections are very numerous. We could have a whole nother hour session on that itself. And I'm happy to be open. And Suzette, I'm glad you brought that up because, as we've been talking, and I should know, Suzette has been a dear friend and in many ways advisor to me as well. And I want to thank you for that publicly. And you know about my recent journey of being a lot more open about those rejections, because I think it's very easy to talk about the success and all the great things that I've done and that I'm doing. But that's not reality. That came with a lot of a few missteps and a few rejections and doors shut smack in my face. But everything happens for a reason, and it's part of the story, and it continues to build the resiliency, I think.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Mikal wants to know, she says, thank you for representing us on so many fronts. What tips would you give us to protect our psychological safety as people of color navigating this system? What are you doing to, okay, these are pretty loaded.
No, I love it. I love it because, I think and there's got to be, I'm sure, a term for this that I'm not maybe remembering. And by the way, I did see somebody mention that they appreciated my recall, which I think I'm falling off on my recall. I gotta probably take more vitamins to keep me sharp. But I have this I like to say I have this weird memory. I actually just ran into someone that I hadn't seen in 6 years. And I remembered her instantly, and she remembered me, and I remembered anyway where I remembered her from, and she was astonished. But I like to say it's a nervous tick. I just remember things, and I can't shake that loose. But all that to say is the notion of mental health and making sure that we're the same way we treat if I were to, you know, walk out and sprain my ankle or break a leg or arm, you know, God forbid, knock on wood, that I would rush to the hospital, is the same way that we should be thinking about things like therapy, counseling circles, support groups that are focused right on men alone, on women alone, mixed. For folks that are grieving a loss. Speaking of loss, we just lost one of the most important civil rights giants of our time, Mr. Harry Belafonte, 96 years old, lived a long, fantastic life, but still, even in his latter life, had so much to give. And I had a chance to work with him and his daughter, Gina Belafonte, who I'm going to try to go see here in the next couple of days. And I mention him because, you know, when you're grieving, I mean, that's just a whole set of things that you have to manage and that no one should have to do on their own. So I am a huge supporter of mental health support and therapy. And I think we got to find ways to make it more accessible from a financial perspective. And two, remove the stigma, especially among our communities. And I'll speak for my own community too, and even more specifically the Dominican community on that issue. I think there's a lot of work we have to do in that space. And frankly, I should note that I'm kind of later to this journey. I'm a more recent arrival to that journey of trying to protect my own myself mentally, psychologically, my energy. So if anyone has tips, I welcome them. But I think that is speaking of challenges of our time and of our society, especially in the post quote unquote, because I think we're just in a different phase of the pandemic world. That's going to be one of the biggest challenges. And I think we got to be talking about it. We just got to be talking about it. And again, a believer of seeking out the help when you can and where you can, and happy to continue that dialogue offline, both from happy to share more about my own journey, but two, happy to hear what folks, how you all are managing those issues as well.
We don't want to drain you, so we're going to stop with all the questions in the chat, but I do have 2 questions here, and that would be the last ones. And if you can just, you know, if you succinctly just answer them, we can close up. I don't want to keep you too long. First of all, Ernesto said he will invite you to a million things. So just you have that invitation. We can talk about it. Hector wants to know, what advice do you have on authentic networking and how he can be more intentional in networking?
Can I just highlight 2 quick things? Mary, totally agree. Setting healthy work-life boundaries is a huge key to protecting your energy. I am horrible at that, and maybe that's maybe the first thing I gotta work on personally. But all kidding aside, I think that is incredibly important. So thank you for highlighting that piece. And I'm sorry, I know I'm going off question, but Argelis, Adriano Espaillat, who's the sitting Congress member that represents the Lehman and most of uptown Manhattan and the Bronx, was the first ever elected Congress member who was undocumented, who had previously been undocumented. And I could give you a pretty short to long list of individuals that I hope that could create some inspiration, because I know how hard it is to be undocumented. I don't know it personally, but I know it through very close relationships that I've had and family members over the course of my life, how hard it is. So keep the faith, as one of my other mentors at Lehman, Vincent Suguero, would tell me. And again, look at some of the leaders that I think in many ways are representing us right now that have that same story. And hopefully that creates a bit of light. And we got to keep fighting for comprehensive immigration reform. The fact that we're still having conversations around basic notions of one of the most important contributors of our society, it astonishes me. But thank you for your question around that. So networking tips. Honestly, I hope, I don't know if you have other sessions, but I'm sure people would have other answers. I'm just all about the authentic, organic I'm not talking to someone or building a relationship unless there's that like real organic, authentic connection. I know a lot of people disagree with that approach because they're like, no, you gotta, if that's the mayor, you gotta go meet the mayor. If that's the, I'm the guy that will, I don't know, talk to anyone. You put me in front of a wall, I'll talk to the wall. And I don't really, you know, obviously I work in this space, so when I have to be strategic, I am. But the reason why I could say, you know, it's been about a 15-year or so journey for me so far in terms of being out in the workforce. The reason why I could count on relationships like a Julie Rodriguez, who's now a big deal, is because I built that relationship in an authentic way. And there she is, right? So the reason why I could call the sitting US ambassador to India, who was the former mayor of Los Angeles, California, Eric Garcetti, is because, you know, and I met him actually as a council member, and then he became mayor, is because we built a friendship over the years. And when I go to India, guess who I'm going to be with and spend time with and build with and help support. So I think build authentic relationships, and that'll take you very far away, a very long way.
Thank you, Elias, so much. Janet, do you want to say anything to Elias?
Thank you. I'm speechless for once, as my students know. I just want to thank you for your time. I mean, you're such a busy person, and I think my students, I can speak for them, have learned more in this, you know, hour than they've learned in their program so far. So, I mean, thank you so much, really, really.
I'll do some more. I think you're being too kind in that.
Please,
but
Janet, I'm Janet.
I appreciate it. And again, and Suzette knows this. Let's try to leave aside the term busy. We're all busy, right? We're all managing a lot of things, but any opportunity that I get to do this, I always welcome it, because frankly, believe it or not, I'm leaving with so much from this conversation, and I've had a chance to read everyone's comments as well. I think somebody asked how I spell my name. I think happy to put that on the chat too. But I leave these sessions, especially with my dear Lehman family, with so much as well. So I appreciate you all taking the time as well this evening.
Thank you so much. And we'll be in contact. Get some rest, okay? Get that work-life balance thing on. Thank you folks so much for joining us. This was pretty phenomenal. What a way to end the speaker series. Thank you, Elias. Thank you, everyone. Emily, anything?
Yes, if everybody can fill out our leadership evaluation before you head out. Just a little bit on, you know, how tonight went. We would greatly appreciate that.
Go easy on me, but be honest. Be honest, okay? Emily, thank you. Great to see you as well.
Thank you as well. That's actually, I wanted to comment. There's a section that I want to like play at our next SGA training session. I was just like, you hit it right on the head. Like I want, yeah. So it's always a pleasure. It was
my pleasure, my honor to be with you all tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good night, folks.
Good night. Bye.
Bye-bye.